Hey everyone, this is baby Micah. Micah was 6 weeks old as of yesterday. He was born on September 27th, and at the request of a few friends, they were like, hey Caleb, you should probably just take off a few weeks from story, take off several weeks, just enjoy your time with Micah. I agreed. I was like, that's a great idea, let's do that. And this guy is just awesome. You can see him, he's super alert right now, love him to death. And when I took off, I didn't know that his namesake in the book of Micah, Micah chapter 6, verses 6 through 8 was going to be a part of the reading for this year. So I thought maybe what we would do today, instead of doing some storytelling, is you guys would just see me maybe speaking some words over Micah and kind of just talking about what's going on in those couple of verses. Now, the prophet Micah was sent to Israel, and Israel was in a state where they had just kind of turned away from the way of God. They turned away from the way of love. And what they were really about was power and land. They just wanted more power, they wanted more land, more power, more land. And that's just kind of what they were about. They thought that if they had more power, if they had more land, that things were good. So what was happening behind the scenes is that people were actually suffering. The fatherless were suffering, the motherless were suffering, the widows were suffering, the stranger or the foreigner, they were suffering in the land, while those who were in power were just celebrating lavishly. Now, those in power were having these big religious parties. They were just throwing these big, huge parties. They were celebrating all of these rituals, these religious rituals. They were singing songs and getting together and having big feasts. And it's actually a theme that occurs in several of the Old Testament books. And it's just not the way of God. You can't throw parties. You can't have these religious festivals and do all these spiritual sounding things when people are just around you, suffering, and pretend like it's not there. What was really going on is that the Israelites were masking the suffering. Those in power were masking the suffering outside of their circle. They could really care less about those in their circle. So Micah comes along, and God sends Micah and says, that can't be. This is not God's way. And in these few verses in Micah chapter 6 through 8, Micah just kind of calls them out. He says, hey, God's not necessarily interested in your sacrifices. He desires mercy. He's not interested in your firstborn son. He's not interested in all these rituals and all these festivals and all these lavish displays of worship. That's really not worship. That's really not the way of God. He says, but this is the way of God. And Micah, I want you to know this. This is the real way of God. It's to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And kind of how we might say that today, it's love God, love people. That's the language we would use. But it's verses like this in the Old Testament that really back up what love God and love people is all about. Now, to act justly, that's kind of like having an umbrella, and having a big umbrella. It's not an umbrella just to cover your own, not to cover your own people, but it's an umbrella so big that it covers all people. It covers everyone. It covers the fatherless. It covers the motherless. It covers the widow, the stranger, the foreigner. To act justly means to take care of them, to watch over them, to be there for them. That's actually one of your biggest acts of worship. It's not singing songs and saying the right prayers or saying the right things. It's taking care of others. That's one of the most important things you can do with your life, to act justly. And to love mercy. Again, God desires mercy, not sacrifice. We can't please God or earn our way into heaven. We can't be so grand that we can say the right things or pray the right prayers or put on the right show that it's going to please God. That's not what pleases God. It's taking care of the least of these. That's what pleases God. And that last part, to walk humbly with your Lord, or to walk humbly with your God, that just means you're willing to go where God goes. That means you're willing to take all your ways and to replace it with God's way. And God's way is love, period. That's it. His way is love, and it's broad and it's expansive, and it reaches out beyond borders and tongues and nations. And that's one of the most important things you'll ever do with your life, is to follow God's way of love. Not chase after power, not chase after land, not pretend like there aren't bad things happening to people are all around you, and just showing up to a church service on Sunday and singing songs and preaching a good message and doing all these spiritual things. Your greatest act of worship would be to show compassion to others, to love others. to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Micah, that's your namesake. Love you, little guy.